Hello, Ken. This is my Michigan State bye-week video, and we're just going to address the elephant in the room. I'm going to touch on the Mel Tucker to LSU rumors. Some people might hate me for this, but you know what? It is newsworthy, and I figured I'd give a few of my thoughts on the situation. Before I get into it, remember to like, subscribe, comment, and hit that notification bell down below. I do greatly appreciate you. Okay, Mel Tucker to LSU. Do I believe the rumor is true? Yes, I believe there is some truth to that rumor. I believe LSU, if they're doing their due diligence, would be foolish not to look at Mel Tucker based on what he has accomplished at Michigan State so far. Do I think it's possible? Yes. Yes, I think it's possible Mel Tucker could leave to go to LSU. Do I think it's a certainty or a foregone conclusion? No, I don't feel that's the case either. I really could see it going either way. And I don't even know if Mel Tucker knows what he is going, if the rumor's true, if LSU does in fact reach out to him and eventually offer him the job. I don't know that Mel Tucker knows what he'd do right now. That's a tough call. It really is. So, I mean, I know that Michigan State has some boosters that have deep pockets now that they didn't necessarily have back in the day, especially when Saban was pilfered by LSU, you know, back in the day. So they definitely have more money in the program now. However, they don't have LSU money. They closed the gap. Okay, they did close the gap. There is more money in the Michigan State program now than there was previously. That gap between them and the wealthier programs in the country has tightened a little bit. But the fact of the matter is LSU can offer more money than Michigan State can. It's just the way it is. I just wanted to get that out there first. Yes, Michigan State's closed that financial gap a little bit. They've got some boosters with some deeper pockets. That always helps. But LSU has got more boosters with deep pockets than what Michigan State has. Michigan State's got a couple. LSU's got a lot. There's a lot of money flowing through that program. So they can outbid Michigan State if they chose to, if it only came down to money. But I don't believe it does. There's obviously more factors that go into this. So reasons why Mel Tucker would ultimately choose to stay. He's already got a good thing going. He brought in all these transfers. You know, they're undefeated right now. You know, maybe if things sour second half of the season, that might tempt him to leave a little bit more, but I don't necessarily see that. I don't believe that's going to happen. You know, he's invested in his players. He's a loyal guy. He's got ties to Michigan State. I mean, he does have ties to both schools, but he has said that he wants to win a national championship at Michigan State. He seems to genuinely like it in East Lansing. And, you know, he's got an athletic director that he really likes. He's got a program that supports him. And those are all things that are not to be taken lightly. He's got a great recruiting class coming in. So, you know, it's not, like I said, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I think back in the 90s, you know, early 2000s, if LSU came sniffing around, I think most people would feel like, yeah, okay, the coach is definitely gone. Just because there was that difference in program prestige and money and basically everything back in the day. But we're not there anymore. And Michigan State, you know, it's not a foregone conclusion that just because a big program like LSU comes sniffing around, I don't believe it's a foregone conclusion that the coach will leave. And like I said, I mean, Mel Tucker's invested a lot of time here. Another reason he might stay is because he just left Colorado without spending, you know, a whole year there. So is he going to be that quick to jump ship once again? He certainly could. You know, when the skillet's hot, you got to jump, right? So the saying goes. I mean, you know, we'll see if he does or not, but that's something to consider. If you're constantly jumping around, do you lose a little bit of credibility on the recruiting trail? You know, do you prove yourself to be maybe not such a loyal guy? I don't think that's really going to hurt him too much as far as recruiting is concerned, honestly. I think fans are affected more by that than recruits are. But I'll touch on that more in a little bit in my reasons why he might leave. But, he's got a good thing going. He's building a program, and they're looking good right now. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he'll leave by any stretch of the imagination. Michigan State's done a good job of funneling some money into their football program. Their facilities are nice, and they are constantly improving them. And they just have more money to throw around. So I think that those are all very good and valid reasons why he might stay. Reasons why he might leave. LSU can offer more money. They just can. They've got a lot of boosters, a lot of money flowing through that program. It's been a powerhouse for longer. That's just the state of things right now. LSU is in a better climate. It's a lot easier to get kids to go to a school in the South than it is to try to get them to come to a school in the North where it's going to snow for months on end. I mean, that's just the nature of, where you're at geographically. So LSU's got that in their favor. LSU gets a whole state that they get to recruit to themselves, their home state. There's really nobody else there that'll challenge them. I mean, there's Alabama and them are in the area, but for any of those kids in Louisiana that want to stay in Louisiana and, play for a big program, I mean, it's LSU. It's LSU or you have to leave your state. So, they've got that going for them, whereas Michigan State's got Michigan, and even just on the border of Michigan, you still got Ohio State, you got Notre Dame, you got Wisconsin, you got plenty of big programs around them, and LSU, I think recruiting would be a little bit easier at LSU because you basically get your whole state to yourself. And you're in the South. You got Texas next door where a bunch of recruits come from. It's not that far of a jump from Florida to Louisiana compared to trying to get those Florida and Texas kids to come all the way up to Michigan State. That's an entirely different battle, and it's not one that is going to be made any easier by being up in the North where it's snowing all the time. So, the South is talent rich. That's just the way the landscape is right now, and being down there at LSU would make getting some of those big name recruits easier. Does that necessarily equate success? No. But, I mean, getting that 5-star talent and overloading on all that talent certainly hasn't hurt Alabama by any means. So, the LSU's got that going for him. That's another reason he could leave. LSU is just, they have a tradition of winning. They've won national championships. And they get the benefit of that prestige, that history, and from being in the SEC. So LSU's got a much easier road to the playoffs than Michigan State does. Again, that's just, it's just the way it is with the college landscape right now. It's not like Michigan State can do anything about that. It's not a fault of them not doing enough. It's just the favoritism that the SEC gets right now, and it just is what it is. It's LSU can have one loss and still make it into the playoffs, whereas a Big Ten team, it's questionable if they would make it into the playoffs. And if a one-loss Big Ten team were to make it in the playoffs, that's only because other teams lost, and so that kind of bumped them up there. Whereas if you're at LSU and you get one loss, you're still jumping ahead of other teams, right? Like a one-loss SEC team is getting in over a one-loss team from any other conference. It's just the way it is. Right or wrong? I mean, we can all debate that forever, but I'm just telling you why, Mel Tucker might be tempted to go to LSU. If he truly wants to win a national championship, yes, you're in the SEC and the competition you could argue would be tougher, but I really don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that the Big Ten is pretty good. The Big Ten East in particular is as close to the SEC as you're going to find anywhere else in the country, as far as a tough schedule week in and week out. I do believe the SEC is a little bit stronger still, but the Big Ten East is not that far off. So, you're taking on a slightly tougher schedule, but you're also taking on the benefit of being able to lose a game and still make it into the playoffs. So there's a trade-off there. So I think that LSU, even though they're in the SEC, because the SEC gets favoritism, or call it what you will, the benefit of the doubt, it's also slightly easier to get into the playoffs and try to win a national championship at LSU. I mean, look at it this way. If Ed Orgeron can go there, not to take anything away from Ed, I think Orgeron is a solid coach, but if I had to pick, if I want Ed Orgeron as my coach or Mel Tucker, right now I'm taking Mel Tucker. You know, I don't see any reason why Mel Tucker couldn't go to LSU and also win a national championship. You know, if Les Miles could go to the championship game and get there, you know, if Ed Orgeron can get there and win a national championship, I don't see any reason why Mel Tucker couldn't, you know, if given enough time. So those are all reasons why I think he could leave, and will be maybe tempted to do so. He's got ties to LSU too. It's not like he's only got ties to Michigan State. You know, he spent some time coaching as an assistant at LSU too, so there's some natural ties. So I think those kind of outweigh each other or cancel each other, however you want to say that. So I think that's kind of a wash, but it is fair to mention that he does have ties to both schools, so he's not necessarily going to stay at Michigan State just because he has ties there. You know, he's also got ties at LSU, so I don't know how heavily that will factor into his decision per se. Oh, there was something else. I lost my train of thought. I had a reason why. The other reason why he might stay at Michigan State is because of loyalty. Michigan State has been very loyal, almost to a fault, with their coaches, especially coaches that have proven to be able to win some games, right? Mark D'Antonio got a pretty long leash. I think he got a couple extra years that maybe he shouldn't have been given just because of his track record. So, you know, you look at things like that, and if you're a coach, you're like, wow, you know, if I stay here, my teams continue to perform well, and I have a 10-win season here or there, you know, 9, 10 wins, 8 wins on average, they'll be loyal to me, and I'll have a job here for a long time. I'll get paid well, and it'll be a nice, cozy, comfy gig, right, with a chance maybe to reach a little bit higher, maybe to get to the playoffs and win a game, maybe get to a national championship. But bottom line is, if I come here and do well, if I perform well enough, then they'll be loyal to me. You are not going to find that at LSU. You win a national championship, and you maintain that level of success, or you're out, right? That's what they're looking for. That's what they've shown. LSU, Les Miles went to a couple of national championship games and won one, I believe, and, you know, he was out when he started to struggle. Ed Orgeron's 2 years removed from a national championship, and they're like, you know, we're going to part ways. Because, I mean, to be fair, they haven't looked good this year, but if you're weighing your options, you got to take into account the fact that LSU is only going to be as loyal for as long as you're winning. And the moment you stop winning is the moment they're going to start looking elsewhere. Whereas Michigan State will let you have a down year here or there as long as you bounce back from it. So they'll give you that opportunity to rise back up to where you were, and you're not necessarily probably not going to get that at LSU. So another thing to take into consideration. So I wanted to highlight some of the things, like why I felt like he could leave and why I think he'll stay. I think right now it's very early in the process. There's no guarantee that LSU will actually offer Mel Tucker the job, but I think their interest is fair, and I think they'd be silly not to look at Mel Tucker. He does have ties to the schools. He's having tremendous success for just taking over a program, especially considering last season with COVID and everything that happened, you know, outside of football that really affected his ability to coach his team, compared to years without all of that going on. So, you know, I think that it's still too early in the process to say which way he might be leaning, one way or the other. But I did want to, since we had a bye week this week, I did want to highlight the fact that it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion he'd leave if LSU offered. I believe that it's still a toss-up, and we'll just have to see how things shake out. So yeah, touched on some reasons why he'd stay, reasons why he'd leave. What do I think is going to happen? Man, I don't know. In my gut, I feel like if LSU offers him the job, I think he's going to leave. I really do. But there's a lot of things that have to go into that for that to all come together. It's got to be the right offer. If LSU comes in trying to lowball him, he ain't going to leave. You know, if LSU throws out some crazy number, you know, for a salary and makes him some other promises, then yeah, I think, you know, with the right offer, I think he'd leave. I think he would. I don't think he's going to turn down a crazy, ridiculous, amazing offer to stay at Michigan State. As much as I'd love to see him stay, I don't think that'll be the case. So we'll just have to see how interested LSU really is. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that as much as I like Mel Tucker and I think he's doing some really good things, I don't think that Michigan State should try to match a ridiculous offer by LSU if they try to go that route. I would be willing to give Mel Tucker a couple extra million to try to see if that would entice him to stay if LSU throws an offer out there. But if LSU's throwing out numbers like 8, 9, 10 million a year, I don't think Michigan State should match that. Yes, I know Mel Tucker's having a lot of success right now. Still early, too early to tell, in my opinion, if he's going to be able to maintain that success. You know, that's a big question mark. He hasn't been a head coach at one place for long enough for anybody to know that. So I don't think he's as good as he's been to this point. As much as I'd love to see him to stay, I don't want us to overspend to keep him either. There are some other fine football coaches out there that you could get without having to overpay for a guy who's still a question mark. And if you need a prime example of that, let's look at just down the road at Michigan when Brady Hoke was there. Brady Hoke came in and won a lot of games in his first year, and everybody thought, wow, this guy's going to turn Michigan around in a hurry. And then what happened? The wheels fell off. Slowly but surely, every single year, they got worse and worse and worse. So, you know, had somebody come sniffing around, can you imagine what would have happened if somebody had, like, taken that kind of interest in Brady Hoke and offered him a ridiculous amount of money and Michigan ponied up to match it, and then they had a $10 million a year coach in Brady Hoke? Not a good look. So I would preach caution from us. You know, if LSU throws out a crazy offer, you accept the loss. You know, you hate to see it happen, but if Mel Tucker's pulled away by financial gain, then so be it. I say you let him walk and you move on to the next guy. Who might the next guy be? I don't know. I think there's a lot of good options out there right now. Luke Fickell's still out there, right? I know he turned down the job last time, but this is a much different looking program already than it was when they were trying to get him the first time around. You know, they look a lot better now. There's certainly more talent there now than there was when D'Antonio was done. So that might entice him to finally say yes for good this time. Campbell at Iowa State is a pretty solid choice. Is he a home run hit? No, I don't think so. But I don't know that anybody thought Mel Tucker was necessarily a home run hit when they went that route. There was question marks around him too. So take a flyer on some guys and just see what happens. You know, there are some names out there, some guys that think, you know, maybe given the right opportunity, right? Maybe the coach at Western Kentucky. You know, we just saw them. They got one heck of an offense, right? Clearly, he can coach offense. You bring him to a place like Michigan State, and you give him enough money to hire a defensive coordinator to carry the defense, and all of a sudden, you know, he looks like an amazing hire. That's another name you could throw out there. You know, other names. Nick Rolovich was just fired at Washington State. Politics aside, I think Rolovich is a solid coach, and that's a guy you would be willing to pay $3-4 million to come in and give him a chance. He got off to a slow start at Hawaii, but once he changed to the run and shoot, things really took off there. He was on a 3-game winning streak before just getting fired at Washington State. So they started slow to the season, but really started to kick things into gear. So maybe you take a flyer on him, you know, depending on how everything works out with the COVID. And if you're willing to accept the fact that he's not vaccinated, you know, I don't really have an opinion on that necessarily one way or the other. But, you know, I just wanted to throw some names out there. You know, you don't necessarily have to pay $10 million a year to keep Mel Tucker. It's not the end of the world if he leaves. The program is in a better place than it was the last recruiting cycle. So I think you could generate more interest in the program. And Mel Tucker came in and proved that you could come into a program like Michigan State. And if it's not quite what you want, you could quickly shape it into a winning program of your design, right? So I guess that's my takeaway from this. Even if Mel Tucker gets the LSU job and decides to leave, it's not the end of the world. Yes, it will stink. Yeah, I hate to see him leave. I'd love to see him stay. I think he's doing some really special things here. But it's also too early to tell if that success will be maintained. And they're just getting into the meat of their schedule, so it's a lot to be figured out yet. So I would preach caution. That's my takeaway. We should preach caution, not overpay for a coach who's still unproven. He still is. Those are my thoughts on it. I just wanted to touch on that. It is big news right now, and it's during a bye week, so it's getting even more attention than it probably would otherwise. But those are my thoughts on it. Take it for what it's worth. Leave some comments. Let me know how you feel about it and what you think. Then that will wrap this one. So remember, all love, all the time. Peace.